Hi, everybody, and welcome to America Offline. I am here with Havi Wolfson Hall. Javi, how are you doing today?
I am doing fabulously well, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us today. So let's jump right on into it. Why don't you give us just a little bit of background on yourself, what you're up to nowadays, and sort of what brought you to be doing the work you're doing today?
Oh my gosh, that is such a big question.
Yeah.
So, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I got my degree in social work from USC and double master's at Hebrew Union College at HUC. And when I started my practice about 20 years ago, the trend that I was seeing was everything coming online. So our private lives all of a sudden becoming public on platforms such as MySpace and other new iterations of chats like AOL chat rooms and MSN and all of these very early iterations of what we would now call social media.
Right.
And at the time I was working primarily with children and teens, and what I was seeing was a very scary trend of these teens going online and using the internet as their own private diaries and sharing way too much and just putting way too much out there for public consumption. And at the time there wasn't a lot of guideline around any of this. So I really kind of took it upon myself to start looking at these trends and finding ways to get into the communities, such as schools or youth groups or whoever would really have me, honestly, at the time, because everyone was like, oh, it's no big deal and don't worry about it. And really started coming up with a curriculum or even just like a few bits of safety tips for parents and for their students to recognize as maybe some areas of concern, right?
Right.
That's what I was seeing in my office. And lo and behold, here we are 20 years later, and finally, all of this research is now surfacing because we needed to wait this long, to really measure what the effects are. And I'm
Right.
not a researcher, and that's not my jam,
Mhm.
but I could just see that this was impacting how the kids I was seeing were relating to each other, how relationships were being affected, both positive and negative. I'm a
Mhm.
huge tech fan,
For sure.
absolutely. But I was just, seeing these trends and feeling like something had to be done to help protect our information, and especially this younger generation who really aren't able to think about these long-term effects on their own.
Yeah. Wow. So that's super cool, Javi. When we first talked, I didn't realize that you're like one of the early
Early,
pioneers.
early, early. So early they
Yeah.
wouldn't publish my book, David.
Yeah,
So early.
like Sherry Turkle. She was one of the early
Yes,
folks that was doing stuff in like the early 90s about the way
that's
that
right.
internet is impacting society. I'm
Yeah.
so curious, like, do you remember like any of the tools or things that you
Oh,
used to have people
absolutely.
do?
And
Because
they're
I'm like
still
kind of
so
curious,
valid
like how
today.
things.
I mean, I feel like it's funny because I look at my list and compare it to the things that, the incredible work of Common Sense Media and Digital
Right.
Tattoo and all of these really amazing programs that,
Totally.
have really almost formalized everything, to such a great extent that it's so much more user friendly, and people flock to it because of their trust in all of the great minds that have come together to create these great programs.
Right.
So a lot of what I said is what we all kind of take for granted these days. It's the being very mindful of what we're sharing online in terms of
Yeah.
information. It's age range of when a child should be exposed, let alone have their own control over something so
Hmm.
public like a social media account.
Right.
Um, and also just how to better manage the actual devices themselves in the home.
Yeah.
And that's
Right.
really what I'm focusing on these days,
Yeah.
because
For sure.
while I love everything that's being talked about in all of the books and all of the articles and all of the research findings, what I'm seeing today, and as a clinician at Jewish Family and Children's Services and Parents Place here in Palo Alto, I feel like I'm, in Venice during the
Yeah,
Renaissance. Like
right,
I'm meeting with all of these incredible minds that are behind all of this incredible technology. And yet in the home, it's a completely different story. So people are listening to the advice, they're getting the tips on articles and things like that, but it's the implementing, and getting everybody in the house on the same page that seems to be the real source of conflict. So that's really what I've been focusing on most recently, is really helping the families that I see get on the same page. And I don't mean have the same rules and anything like that, but just really finding a better way to balance and to manage their technology use, at
right.
least in the home.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure.
So that's been my focus recently.
Yeah, so you mentioned that it's hard to sort of create a shared language and understanding about how to create a healthier balance of technology usage in the home. Why is it, in your opinion, Javi, why is it so challenging to sort of have a harmonious conversation about it?
So this is the best way I have put this. It is the substance of choice, right? This is the source of conflict in our generation,
Right,
because similar to, generations of the past, who maybe it was, tobacco,
right,
or, recently it could be, sugar and carbs. It's
totally.
something that we are exposed to as a generation, and you and I are of that generation where we were exposed to it as children, and we were raised by parents who didn't quite understand, what this new technology was or how it should play a role in our lives. And because we weren't parented around it and didn't have these amazing guidelines and tips and all these experts, warning us,
Right.
we thought it was fine,
Yeah.
to just be on it 24/7. And
Right.
what do you mean? Why is it going to be harmful? But
Yeah.
then as we become older and as we recognize that, maybe we're not such great multitaskers, and,
Right.
maybe this is impacting me, not just physically, but mentally and in so many ways, that, it sometimes takes a generation to see the next generation's pain to finally do something about it. And I
Right.
think that's where we are now.
So are
So,
you saying, Javi, sorry to
mhm,
interrupt, but are you saying that Generation X, as parents of Generation Z, they had a more difficult time, or they're having a more difficult time
yes,
because, kind of like smoking, we didn't know.
we didn't know.
Know what was okay, what was not okay, how much is okay to use. We didn't, the Gen Xers didn't know, but generationally, millennials and their kids, like myself, we don't even know the
Yes,
name of the generation of our kids
not
yet.
yet.
It hasn't been named. We're going to be a little bit better off just because there's people like you and me that are doing the
That's
work,
right.
that are teaching the tips and tricks. Can you expand upon that, these
Absolutely.
generational differences, a little bit?
Absolutely. So, it makes sense, right? I mean, we have, and this phrase has been used since the very beginning, the digital natives and then the
Right.
digital immigrants, right?
Right.
So, because our generation, we are termed immigrants because we weren't raised with it.
Right.
We were not given that opportunity, to really be a generation that, well, let me start over. Let me just
With
rewind.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. So when we're born into a generation and we're the natives, right, where we don't know any other way, then we need to learn how to manage. If you are the generation where the item was introduced and you're the immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
you weren't raised with it, we know what life was like without it.
Right.
And as we're aging, as my generation and older generations are aging and seeing the impact of technology and these devices, and what the impact is on us
Mm-hmm.
and what the impact is on younger generations, we now are mature enough to have both foresight and hindsight
Right.
that this is an issue. And
Totally.
that's why all of these studies are happening now, because we're now in that position where we are the researchers, we are the educators, we are
Mm-hmm.
the parents,
Right.
we are the clinicians that
Mm-hmm.
see the impact, both the short term and the long term. And
Right.
so we are looking to the younger generations to do it better than we could do, because we really didn't know what the impact was going to be. We could
Right.
tell it wasn't heading in a really great direction for some.
Yeah.
However, we didn't have the tools yet, or the information or the research to back up why we had that, that instinct or that gut feeling that this might not end well.
Right. Yeah, totally. One thing that's funny, I have all these things I want to get to with you, but like you keep on saying things that are giving me new thoughts. In some ways, we talk about the generational differences, and like here I am, like smack dab in the middle, like millennials are 1980 to 1985. I was born in 87. In some ways,
Right.
I feel like maybe like when millennials have their first baby, like there should be like a course on screens, because
Oh my
I feel
gosh.
like we got to nip it in the butt now,
Yes.
because it's so hard after the 10-year-old has been on screen since he was 2. Man, you're
Yes.
really fighting an uphill battle, and you
That's right.
probably see it all the time, because I go out to dinner with my wife often, and it's rare that we'll see a family with young kids and them
Not
not
on a screen.
like when I see a family and their kids are like, they're actually engaging with their kids and talking with them, they
Yes.
like seated. I want to go up to them and like buy their meal and give them a high five.
That's right.
You
And I've
know?
actually seen articles where people have done that.
Wow, really interesting.
Yes, where they have found the families who don't have the screens, and they, buy a dessert or whatever, like just as something to
Just to like pay
acknowledge.
it forward a little bit and be like, hey, nice
Kind of.
job. Yeah, that's so cool. I
Yeah.
like that. I think that's a little bit of like what it's going to take. A little bit is like everybody kind of getting on board with like, hey, like when the kids come over, like we're just a screen free house. Like when my son comes to yours, like I just appreciate if you would just have them play outside.
Yeah.
It's kind of like all coming together.
Yes.
So anyways, yeah, just a little side note there, but
But I think you're right though, in terms of generationally. I think that, while the train has left the station, so to speak, for the older generations, it is never too late, to start educating and to really think about how to be more mindful around all of this.
yeah,
And I think that that's the piece that, when I read the articles of research findings, and they're, these scary headlines, and this like very doomsday, kind of approach, I don't think we're giving the consumers enough credit. And I really feel like the sweet spot is not telling everybody that they need to be screen free,
right,
that they really need to be more mindful about the how and the why and the what they are using,
yeah,
so that they can teach their children how to balance it for themselves.
correct,
Because our younger generations are going to be even better at this than we are. And we are learning so much from them already,
yep, yeah,
because what we're also seeing in the research is that kids are more concerned about their parents' use than parents are concerned about their use,
interesting,
their
wow,
children's use, right? I feel like we're finally at that tipping point where we can ask the children, because they're old enough,
yeah,
where I see, when I'm in a school, or if I'm, meeting with a group and doing a tech talk or something like that with, multi-generational group, which is what I prefer, so that everybody's hearing the same message,
mm-hmm.
is that when I ask the group, who here is concerned about your parents' use, every child's hand goes up.
Yeah.
So
And is it like genuine concern for the parents' like mental well-being, or is it just like, I think my parents, they have an issue using tech similar to how my friends might have issues
I think that would be an interesting research project,
yeah,
honestly, because while I think a lot of parents have a hard time managing their usage, it's usually like, well, it's work, they expect me to be on 24/7,
mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I need to be on Instagram to, like create the brand and, keep it like,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. But to a kid, your, mom is like, playing, you know, Jewel Box, or, one of
Right,
these,
right,
Candy
yeah,
Crush, right?
totally,
One of
yep,
these things. So, I think it really is more about what are the devices taking the place of in the family home.
right,
And what I'm noticing, and the best case scenarios, that I've worked with, because I also really work with families around, not just contracts, like all of that, but also what are we going to do to replace this thing
Right.
that we're so drawn to?
Mm-hmm.
That is such an easy fix, out to dinner, or if I need to make dinner and the kids need to be occupied, it's such an easy fix to turn on a
Yeah,
screen. So
totally.
what can we do instead? And it's bring the kids into the kitchen and cook with them.
Yeah.
It's replacing connection with connection, right?
Yeah,
That's
right.
my new
Man,
favorite thing.
if we're only that easy to get a kid, oh hey, put down your Fortnite and come cook with me. If it was only that easy.
But I would tell you every single time, if that were offered early enough and often enough,
Yeah.
and it was just a part of the family routine,
Hmm.
there is nothing that's going to replace that connection to Fortnite more than the connection with a parent
Yeah.
or the connection with family. And
Yep.
if we're trying to raise human beings that can connect with the outside world, the home is that's the
The foundation.
experimentation
Right.
place, right? And
Mm.
so that's where those lessons are learned. That's where that socialization starts. But if
Yeah.
mom and dad are on their screens and kids are left without that connection and that role modeling is happening in the home, then
Mm-hmm.
what else are we going to expect from our
Right.
children?
Yeah.
We need to replace the thing with something that's even more valuable, and that is our connection with each other.
Yeah. No, I love that, Javi. So let's dig a little bit deeper on that if we could.
Sure.
So obviously you mentioned like two things. Like you mentioned, yeah, oh, like you're on your screens and I'm cooking dinner for you. Like, why don't you come help me? You chop the you chop the cucumber, you do the tomatoes, just don't cut yourself.
Yes.
But like, all right, so that's like one instance, but like let's dig a little deeper. Like if you were working with a family and their kids were just not, their lives aren't in complete disarray, but they're just like general overusers, just like 60 to 70% of most of
Mhm.
6 to 16-year-olds out there.
Yes.
How would you start to walk the path of developing a little bit more balance, but with a little bit of focus for this question on like how to replace screen interactions with more enriching offline habits? Can you just dig in on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is my favorite part. So this is where I get to pretend to be Marie Kondo, right? And the
Okay.
tidying up, right?
Yeah.
So every family is different. And I
Yep.
don't say that, what I'm going to say today might not work for every family, but
Totally. Yep.
the general guidelines that I put out for every family to think about is to really think about, number one, the physical space. So where in the house are screens permitted, right? Where do they live? Where do the screens live? Meaning, where can they be where they are turned on and engaged with? And I try the best that I can to help families think about keeping their devices in the public spaces of the house so that everybody knows what everybody is doing, right? It kind of helps with accountability. It helps with the idea of needing to sneak or staying up late at night, under the covers. And, it kind of creates a more honest environment from the
Totally.
start.
Mm-hmm.
It's also where are devices being put to bed? Where do they sleep? And so the families that have the cell phones next to their bed or at the nightstand or whatever, I try really hard to help families replace the why they need the
Right.
phone next to the bed. And that could be, it's my alarm clock. Okay, well, go down to Walgreens and get yourself an alarm clock for,
Oh yeah.
you know,
$5, right? Yeah.
$5.
Yep.
It's a quick fix. Oh, I listen to music. Well, there are other ways that you can listen to music
Mm-hmm.
that isn't, the internet right next to your head
For
all
sure.
night long.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we are seeing, and Common Sense Media just came out with all of their research findings, is that sleep disturbance is increased so significantly, even if the phone is turned off and it's charging in your bedroom,
Wow.
which is amazing,
Yeah.
right? Just
Unbelievable.
knowing that it's within arm reach can disrupt sleep and not get you into that really restorative, you know, phase of sleep that we all need to function on.
Mm-hmm.
So number one is, where do devices live? Number two is to create the schedule of the day. We are all so busy in this day and age.
Totally.
We are so busy. It is a rare occurrence, at least from where I'm sitting, that there isn't a 2-income household, that children aren't at school for a very long day and earlier because daycare is necessary. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about, our bubble here in Silicon Valley,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are so few hours of the day that we're actually together as a family that I really try to help families think about that time and create it as a sacred time. And if that means, creating a morning routine that is natural for the family, to not be on screens first thing in the morning. And I say
Mm-hmm.
this to the parents too, is to really
Mm-hmm.
think about our circadian rhythms, to really think about how that impacts us. If that's the first thing we do when we wake up, go straight to email, go straight to that blue screen to get the day
Mm-hmm.
started.
Right.
It's a jolt to the system
Totally.
that our bodies aren't so great at, you know, figuring out,
Right.
right? So that
Mm-hmm.
initial jolt to the system can sometimes just keep us in a heightened sense of, existence,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So to really think about our morning routine, to really think about setting intentions around where and why we engage in our screens and the timing of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we do that first thing, then we won't maybe be as present to our partners or to our children or to the needs of the household. So
Right.
that's one area that I try to help families with. And also to say that, yes, it would be helpful if you had the screen on in the morning for the young ones, if you're trying to get the older ones out of the house and all of that. But there are so many other ways that you can manage the morning and not depend on screens.
Yeah. I love
And
it.
to
It's like,
even use
yeah.
it almost as like the carrot at the end of the marathon, is
Mm-hmm.
like the thing like, hey, if you guys get all of these things done, then if there's time left over,
Yeah.
then yes, let's put on PBS Kids or let's, something like that.
Yeah.
So, all of these types of things. And same thing with the evening. How is the evening conducted? Who's in the kitchen? Are you able to sit down as a family and have a meal? That's like the number one indicator for children's mental health later in life is,
Mm.
surprisingly, did you have a meal with your family?
Wow.
A weekly
Yeah.
meal, not even every night, but even just
Wow.
a weekly meal can make such a big difference in a child's mental health and wellness.
Totally.
So, to really think about what the role is, of the family. I feel like we need to reclaim familyhood,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just being farmed out way too much.
Right.
Daycare, school, after school activities, and they all have valid and wonderful pros to them. But again, going back to family, this is our foundation. This is our identity. This is where everything else comes from. And to really create it as sacred time.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So much good stuff you said right there. Yeah, I agree. And, one of the areas that, a suggestion that I've given, just another thing for the listeners, like I love the car as being a sacred space for
Yes,
connection. It's like, let's put the phones in a center
absolutely.
console because there's really no distractions other than maybe the radio or what's outside, but it's a great
Yes.
place. Oftentimes you're picking up your kid from practice or from an activity or from school. And it's a great time to say, hey, what was the best part of the day? What'd you
That's
learn?
right. And that's when some of the best conversations can happen, because you're not putting them on the spot and you're
Yeah.
not making that direct eye contact, which can make some kids shut down kind of,
Yeah. Hmm.
if everybody's just looking forward. But in addition to that, David, I mean, our children are going to be driving one day,
Yeah.
and sooner than we think.
Yep.
And thank
Hmm.
goodness we now have laws around texting and driving and all these other things. But, watching mom or dad, like on the phone at stoplights, and other things like that, it's really role modeling very distracted, you know, it's a very distracted existence, right?
How
And if
does,
we want to help our children be the best drivers and the healthiest and the safest, we need to start role modeling it ourselves.
yeah, 100%. And as far as this like distracted existence goes, I mean, how my mind, and because we're sticking to teens here, I think a lot about like schools, right? And
Yes.
it's so funny, like as we're talking here, I don't like that I'm getting bombarded with text, but my wife sends me a message. San Mateo High School, I live in San Mateo, goes phone free, largest public school in the country to do it, which I guess is new. So I'm like stoked
Nice.
about that. But I've actually worked and talked with some other schools locally,
Yes.
and they say, David, we love what you're standing in an offer. You're offering to come in, do workshops and assemblies, but like we're one-to-one student to iPad, and they're almost like bragging about it like
Oh
it's something
yeah.
that's great. So like to your point about like distractions, can you just speak to, screens being a distractions in school and at
Yes.
home with kids having to do tests and and what's the word I'm looking for? Enter, their schoolwork on through like Google Docs and things like that.
Yes.
How do you think that impacts a kid's ability to retain and to learn information?
So what I love about this new trend, and I do think it's actually a positive thing if handled well, is that if we're introducing an individual device in the school setting, it is the perfect place to fail, right?
Mm,
It is the perfect place to experiment and to figure out our threshold.
mm,
Because, like I said, every kid is different, every family is different. And within every family, you're going to have a kid who really has a hard time with distractibility, and you're going to have the kid who's like absolutely cool. Like they
right,
can self regulate, they know when they've had enough, they could turn it off, no problem, and there is that, those two extremes and then everything in between.
right.
And to introduce devices in the school, while it's, a lot of people are upset by it, I feel like it's the perfect time, because this is where they're going to learn what the limits are for themselves before getting to college,
Mm,
right? My first computer I got when I was in college, and I almost failed my first semester because I didn't have my parents over my shoulder telling me, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe you need to go to bed, you
mm-hmm.
know? And so I think having this experience with parental supervision and with the schools really focusing on this is a tool for learning and really putting the parameters on, for themselves as a school, and being very aware of what some of the pitfalls are, and having people like us come in and talk about them and talk about tips and talk about ways that, they can learn how to manage it for themselves. I think that's the best way through. So I think it's a great thing, but again, everything in moderation and everything with the right intention. So it's been my experience that I've been called into schools because they want to introduce the one-on-one iPad, and they want to
Yeah.
do it earlier and earlier,
Oh, yeah.
and parents are up in arms because some parents are screen free, and like my house is screen free.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, like I said before, like sugar, right, as my favorite example,
Mm-hmm.
sugar is in everything, right? Can't really get away from it. I mean, you have to
Right.
try really, really hard to
Mm-hmm.
get away from it. But if you're raised in a household where you've never had sugar ever, what's going to happen
Right.
when all of a sudden you're given a candy store,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
You're gonna go
And
crazy.
what's
Yeah.
going to happen when you go to your friend's house and the friend's house doesn't have the same restrictions as your house? I will tell you what will happen, right?
Yeah.
And if you're raised in that house, how are you going to get your fix?
Hmm.
You're not going to be honest with your parents, are you?
Yeah.
No.
Javi, that's such a unique viewpoint, because I think that most people like me, maybe in the digital wellness field, maybe not all, but yeah, I don't know, will be like, oh, like I can't believe they're one-to-one iPad, and you're like more like, it's not all bad. I think there's some good
It's not
there in
all
that
bad.
they're learning how to navigate in academic environment with screens, because you know what, come college and come after college, those screens are always going to be there. So
Yes.
now that my mind goes to what do we say to those parents, like Steve Jobs, his kids and many of the other tech CEOs, they go to screen free schools, these
That's right.
Waldorf schools. So put you on the spot. Are you saying that maybe those screen-free schools can maybe do a better job of maybe implementing a little, at least a little bit of technology in there? Because when those Waldorf kids go off to college, they're not going to have any idea of how to balance technology
Right.
and academic
And
environment.
that's my fear for those
I think
students.
it's
That
fair.
is my
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah.
Because like I said, even if the school says that we are screen free, even if the household says we are screen free, our children are getting exposed.
Right.
Right. And our children will find a way. They are much savvier than we ever will be.
Right.
And I think we need to be a little bit more trusting in their ability to discern for themselves. And that goes to just like a whole generation of parenting, and that's a whole nother talk for another day.
Right.
But, I think that we are learning so much about our role as parents and our role as the gatekeeper for these experiences. And I think the more we expose our children within reason, right, within reason, to these experiences under our roof, and while we're surrounded by professionals who are looking at this from every angle, we are in such an amazing time right now. And we do have so many people looking at this and really trying to make this as healthy as possible. I think of it like getting nutrition labels put on, food containers. Like, we're finally learning what is going into all of this, how it's being made, and how it's impacting us, on a cellular level even, right? And so I think we are at this incredible tipping point where we have the information that we need, and it really is up to now the Steve Jobs and everyone else who are in these positions to finally look at all of this, and maybe instead of sending their kid to a screen-free school, looking at what the role is of the people who are creating this tech, and how they can take this fear and this anxiety and this concern and start really channeling it to make tech even healthier, and to make it, again, have the content be different, and really be more mindful of the types of things that they're providing us. And it's a big conversation. I love to be a part of it because I am so passionate about it.
Yeah,
I
can
think
tell.
it's humongous, and it's bigger than I ever thought it could be. And I'm so excited by it, because I really do feel like we can learn so much from our younger generation. We can learn so much from each other and our experiences, as long as we're open and honest about it.
Yeah.
And not be in such an anxiety, fear-filled position.
Yeah.
But really embrace it, because it's not going anywhere.
Totally. And with the idea of sort of embracing it, for some reason, all your little responses, Javi, they're putting me in like solution creativity mode. I don't know what it is.
Right? I apologize.
Have that
It's where
effect
I
on
go to.
Yeah. But I was just thinking, because you mentioned like, big tech. I think of like an Apple, right? And they're actually, better than maybe some others, as far as, they are interested in creating some sort of technology mindfulness components to what they do. But how cool would it be to stick with, like, just imagine this, if somehow when a kid got a phone, or Apple knew, or a parent knew when they gave their kid their phone, they weren't even allowed to either open it or use it or unlock certain parts of it until they went through a training.
DMV training for technology. I've been thinking about it for years. And I think,
happen,
why
right?
not?
Yeah.
Right? We make them go through it before they drive. We make it, I think we could all benefit from that kind of training. And the issue is that it might not be so easy to do this in the private, private sphere of like, okay, you get your first cell phone and these are the steps you have to go through. But the schools that I've been working with, we are going through, orientation before receiving your first iPad or your first Chromebook or your first, device that is school issued.
Right.
So because it is a school issued device, the school can take that role. And again, it depends on the school and their approach to all of this. But in a perfect world, in the utopian world that I'm thinking of,
right,
every child and every parent would have to go through this orientation before receiving the device,
Yeah.
so that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what the expectations are. And if we could make that the requirement for individual devices, that would be even better.
Right.
But I think because, we can only intrude so much, and unless a family comes to me, I don't know what's happening behind your closed doors.
Right.
I can, I'll talk to you on the yard, or pickup line, or, at the birthday party if you have some questions. But unless people are seeking out the help, unless people are acknowledging that there's something not in balance in their lives, then there's really no entry point. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's sex ed in schools,
Yes.
and there's, there's nutrition education.
Yes.
I mean, kids are using this 6 to 10 hours a day. They're
Absolutely. Like I said, this is the
technology
substance of
education.
choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you also mentioned, we've talked a little bit just here in the last few minutes about like when they get their iPads, when they get their phones, they should have some sort of an education or an understanding. So Javi, can you speak to like at what age or when should kids begin to start to get access to screens? Obviously there's,
There are all kinds
recommendations
of,
out there and stuff like that, but why don't
yes.
you give us sort of your own feel as far as how you guide families on this?
Sure. Well, I think, thank goodness we have a lot of, wonderful organizations trying to create these guidelines for families. And I
Right.
think, like I said before, these are guidelines, right? These are recommendations based on what a child is able to consume and process at different developmental stages. And I think we need to be very mindful of those guidelines, and yet at the same time, look at our individual situations and think about how this plays out in your own home.
Right.
Like I said before, these guidelines are so recent. So a lot of trains have already left the station, right? A lot of parents have already exposed their children earlier to things that I think a lot of times I hear in my office, I wish I hadn't, exposed them at such a young age. And it's like Pandora's box and we'll never get it back in. But I will tell you, it is never too late.
That's good to hear, because I'm sure there's parents out there like, man, I messed it up. I messed up. And like, I always think about that too. Like the brain is very malleable, right?
It's so malleable. And we have to remember that, and especially in our children, their growth is so incredibly amazing that unlike the adult mind, I'm more worried about our generation, quite frankly,
Yeah, right, yeah.
And we'll get those studies much later when we see, God, how this has been impacting our growth in our brains, right? So what we know is that, the brain grows until the age of 25, right? But even at 25, there's the pruning and reconnections of things that happen based on experience. And that's why people can recover from things like addiction. And, that's why there are these other, systems in place for people to get healthy, right? You learn what your body can tolerate. We're all different. Our genes create all of this, incredible cocktail of what makes us who we are. And our goal in life, our job in life, is to figure out what is the healthiest for our bodies. And so I think, going back to the question of when to expose, or when is the best time to expose children to what type of thing, I think what we need to really look at is not the when, but the what, right? And so that is honestly, we can control both of those things. Right? It's like, when do you give your kid, I'm going back to sugar again because it's the best example, like their first birthday, right? They get a big smash cake and they get sugar for the first time, and it's like they go cuckoo bananas, right? And then they have a tantrum and the party's over, right? So it's not about the when, but it's the what and the why behind it. And so going back to intentional use and being mindful about, why are we introducing this to our child? What purpose is it going to serve, right? So every family is different, all of these things. The recommendation is 2 years and younger, only FaceTime
Yep.
on devices so that they're seeing a familiar face. And thank goodness for FaceTime. My husband and I moved up here to the area 10 years ago, and without FaceTime, I feel like my kids wouldn't know their grandparents,
Right.
so thank goodness for that. And
Mm-hmm.
what a positive addition it is to our family. Every
Definitely.
Friday night we get the Shabbat blessings,
Mhm.
over,
Yeah.
FaceTime, and it's
Hmm.
amazing. It's like,
Right.
it's almost like they're there, never
Yeah.
the same, right? No
Totally.
app to replace their lap,
Hmm.
which is
I
how we
love
like
that.
to say it.
Yeah.
However, it is the next best thing. 2 to 5, they really talk about the amount of time, but also the content, to be very aware of the content in which you're exposing your child. So educational, television, PBS, Sesame Street, all of these great
Right.
programming, so that they're seeing technology as again, a tool, something that I like to call growing food or healthy food.
Hmm.
So give them all of the healthy food
Right.
before dessert,
Yep.
right? And
Hmm.
dessert is the rest of the content that, maybe is very commercial, maybe gets a lot of money and a lot of merchandising and, all these other things, but
Yeah.
maybe not give you the best messages and
Hmm.
you know, the best things to consume.
Right.
And, that's where parents will have their own thresholds and their own, some families are Disney families, some families are not, some families like Nickelodeon, some families do not, like everybody has their wide range. And so again, it's not up to me to decide, Javi, the professional, what is what, but what are they doing with it,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
How are they using the content?
Yeah.
And from then on, the reason why Common Sense Media is my like number one go-to resource is because they have an entire team behind this.
Yeah.
They've got parent experts, they have parents, they interview kids about content.
Hmm.
And so every family needs to really, utilize that resource and really think about, okay, why are we going to go expose my child to this kind of movie? What are the themes? What are the messages? What are the talking points afterwards? That's my favorite part.
Oh, that's awesome.
What are the talking points afterwards, so
Yeah. What can we learn from
we
it?
can
Yeah.
use this content as a way to connect afterwards
Yeah.
and really get it back to what are the values that we as a family are trying to instill in our next generation, in our legacy, so that we're raising people to make this world a better place, so that they're kind to everyone, to themselves, and mindful about what they're exposing themselves to.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Such a rich response, Javi. And yeah, I hadn't, I'm very aware of Common Sense. I'm doing a little work with them. I think I mentioned, I didn't
Yes,
know that they have something because, I think there is something to be said about, watching a movie together or playing a video
yes,
game together. Like, you know, like you said, not for everybody, but maybe for some, but for some that maybe do that. I wasn't aware that they have like, hey, what could be the learning lessons from watching this, this movie, but that's a new tip and trick. I hear a lot of tips and tricks. So that's a new tip and trick I've heard about digital wellness that I hadn't heard before, was to hop on
it's
Common Sense
fantastic.
and, before you go out your Friday night to go watch the movie as a family, maybe, download a few, post movie questions or talking
Yes,
points to talk
yes.
about with your kids. I think that's such a great thing to do.
Yeah, because kids like context, and
Yeah.
kids will wonder like, okay, so does this jive with who I am, and
Yeah.
why did that feel a little off, and why was I upset by that? And it really can lead to some very rich conversations.
Yeah. They want to be engaged about these types of things.
They
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So going back, you mentioned, we could put all the restrictions on the kids and give them all the tools and take away all the iPads, but if we are not modeling it the right way ourselves, we're really fighting an uphill battle.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and specifically what I'm getting out here, Javi, is like, what about the parent who's sitting there is like, wow, like, the CEO of my company, he's sending Slack messages and text messages and emails, and he really wants everyone to be, he's sending them very late at night. He wants everyone to be very responsive. Like, what can be done, or what can a parent do to maybe, make it so that they're not getting fired, but maybe in some gentle way that they can start to make an impact within their own organization. What are your thoughts
Yes.
on that?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you so much. So this is something that I really love working with my parents that I see, because they say the exact same thing. I don't want to get fired. I need to be on call. I can't say no. And I think, like I said before, why I'm so excited about this time in this development of technology and its role in our lives, even if that is the the culture of the workplace, we have control still over how we respond to it.
Right.
So I really try my best to empower those parents who are so resistant to this kind of change, to really, again, think about the role that they're playing as a model for their child,
Yeah.
and how, if they are unable to disconnect, if they are unable to unplug, how could they expect that kind of behavior from their child? And what I really try to do, and I like how you said gently, right,
Mhm.
is to really help, especially those parents who feel that pressure, to just find the smallest ways to create boundaries for themselves and their device use. So maybe it's not responding to those text messages late at night, or creating an away message, that
Yeah.
says, thank you for your message, I will tend to it, when I am back online at this time. So
Right.
that you're responding, but you're setting an appropriate boundary,
Yeah.
and especially the managers, and especially the people at the top, like, if you are up at night and writing emails and, all of this, because that's the only time you can do it, try to be mindful of when you're sending it, because it's sending that message of, I need that response right now,
Mm.
which will disrupt the sleep of your worker, which will then make them less productive and more distractible. And, it's just a cycle,
Right.
so keep them in the draft folder.
Yeah.
Send it during business hours. I know that
Mhm.
there's a lot of movement and a lot of talk, about different companies really trying to set offline hours, which is incredible.
It's awesome. Yeah.
It's so great. And having wellness retreats and having experts come in, and even just talking about the ergonomics of how
Oh yeah.
desks are set up, and having massage chairs, for people,
Mhm.
because we're all like becoming hunched over, and
Right.
like
Yep.
hand massages for our poor thumbs that are,
Mhm.
like so tired,
Right.
and carpal tunnel. I mean, all of it. Like, it's funny, but not. You
Yeah.
know, it just speaks to the fact that we are all really hurting. And
Yeah.
so, if we are able to, as employees and as people who maybe are managers or directors or CEOs or whoever in our company, if we could try to, empower, whether it's through HR or just with our own actions, to start to model creating healthier habits around it, then hopefully it will trickle down
Yeah. Be a little bit of a
and it will
domino effect.
spread, because we all are looking for it. We all
Mhm.
need permission to create these boundaries, but nobody will give you permission to create these boundaries. So we need to take it upon ourselves, and perhaps bring this movement into our workplace, so that we are practicing what we're preaching to our next generation,
Yeah.
and that they'll be so much better about it than we ever could.
Yeah. Love that. Javi, so we just talked about a little bit was how do we create sort of adults that can kind of advocate for healthier technology habits at the workplace. It's a
Mm-hmm.
more on the spot question right here that I'm very interested in, and I've been trying to learn about how to create this in teens. What I'm getting at is how can we inspire teens who we maybe wake them up to it, and maybe there's the teen that realizes, hey, they delete their social media and they just realize it's not serving them well. But is it possible? How can we create a culture where maybe there are some teen advocates or youth
Mm-hmm.
advocates that do the similar type of thing that we're asking adults to do, to start modeling healthier interactions? Do you think that there's a place and a way for teens to start doing this and to start
Absolutely.
changing norms? What would that look like?
Absolutely. And I do think that some teens are already taking this upon themselves, in this this wave of increased awareness around mental health and especially anxiety and depression.
Mm-hmm.
I think that our students, our teen students, are using their desire for social justice and action in these ways. And I'm so inspired by them.
Yeah.
Creating amazing, amazing groups of change within their school environments to bring to light a lot of the issues that they're struggling with, because they are the front line, right? They are
Right.
experiencing it themselves. They see their friends struggling. And when they come to the adults and the adults are worse off than they are, then that's very scary,
Right.
you know? So I do see this happening with a lot of the high schools, especially in this area. And I am inspired by the teen panels that I've seen. I'm inspired by some of the groups that I've seen that are just so grassroots, that are, like just coming online, and, things like wait till eighth, like the wait till eighth grade to get a cell phone or to get social media. There are some really great programs that are just starting, but, as easy as just having a teen in a community setting away messages, right? Setting like do not disturb parameters around
Right.
their own use
Mm-hmm.
has such an incredible ripple effect.
Yeah.
And I think, talking to teachers who are working in the health and wellness classes, talking to, the psychology teachers, they are all in that position as well to
Right.
really support those kids that really want to see that change in their peers, and it can happen, and I'm really hopeful that it will.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think it's like that, it's the denial, right? The first step is is accepting that there's
Yep.
a problem, right?
Totally.
And I think
Yeah.
that's where we finally are.
Yeah.
So like I said before, I'm almost dependent on this next generation to be this voice, to be the light in all of this,
Yep.
because they've seen their parents suffer through it, and they can see how it's impacting their friends, and they are the first ones, like I think, I can't remember if it was Screenagers or which movie it was. There's so many great ones out now, but where they all put their cell phones in the middle of the table, and the first one to reach for it has to pay
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
for everyone else. Like,
Love
that's
it.
amazing,
Yeah.
right?
Awesome.
Or the kids who are telling their parents to stop texting them throughout the day,
Yeah.
because like they could be phone free, but sometimes it's the pressure from the parents,
Totally. Oh yeah.
So again, I feel like this generation of teens, they are our hope, and
Yeah.
I love working with them, and I think it could be something, that could be very fruitful,
Yeah.
very, very fruitful.
Totally. I agree. From the time, I've spent a good amount of time working with teens, especially locally, and they're very active. They're very informed. They're like little activists.
That's right.
And, I also am inspired that they're going to, make some change in this world. I think they're going to know how to unlock the lock of what, of how these kids are locked in. I think it's
Absolutely.
going to be them. So listen, we're coming up on time, Javi. This has been such a
Wow.
great,
That was fast.
fast. But I still have, I want to provide, the best possible benefit for the listeners out there. So
Sure.
I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of, let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of like a parent, maybe a local parent, doesn't matter, who has a few teens, maybe some kids in the family, and they're general overusers. They're playing the Fortnite, the video games. All their schoolwork is on iPads and on screens, and they haven't spoken about it too much with their kids yet.
Mm-hmm.
But they're they're inspired. They're seeing the harms. They want to make a change. They're committed to making a change in even their own dynamics. What would like the very first steps be? How would you guide a parent who's ready to make a change right now?
I think there are a lot of resources out there for parents now. I would take a look. I would do a search. I would, find whatever tool is out there to maybe help guide a conversation about just the structure or the role of devices and technology in the house. And I would start that conversation from a place of, from a personal place, not a blaming place, right? Not a, you guys have this problem, but I don't place. But, I see this in the news and I'm hearing about this all over. What are your thoughts about it? I would have a family meeting,
Yeah.
ask them what they think are the issues. There's some great self-tests, self-quizzes, out there online. Is this really a problem? But honestly, even if it's not to the degree of addiction, I'm using my quote fingers.
There you go.
Even if it's not to that point, it really is just about setting intention and being more mindful about what the role is in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're able to impart that message to our child and include them in the problem solving of this problem, this external problem that is in our home, and everybody's on the same page, then it becomes so much more of a group effort rather than parents against kids or let's all gang up on so-and-so. They get bought into the process. So having a family meeting, talking about technology as the thing, right, is a great way to externalize it and not make it personal, but having that open conversation about what's working, what's not working, what can we be, what are we able to change? What are we willing to change so that it doesn't become this large problem? And how are we going to measure that? How are we going to know if it's a problem? What are some of the signals? What are some of the signs?
Totally. Yeah. I love that. And I think just to harp on a little bit more, it's really up to that parent to start to make a little bit, like to start to own it. Hey, I'm not perfect either. And I'm willing to make it right along there with you. And it's all in the spirit of like, let's just be a happier, more connected, more fun family together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And have each other help each other, right?
Yes.
Our job as parents is to make sure that you're safe and that you're healthy and that you're able to make these decisions, whether I'm with you or I'm not.
Yeah.
That's my job.
Yeah.
And so, we need to work on this together as a family. And I trust you and I know that you are going to make the best decisions that you can. And how can I support you in that?
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. I think it really does come down to communication and empowering the kids and letting them know that they have a voice. They should speak up. They could help make the rules. Let's come to them together. That, and from my coaching background, whenever I've tried to get a team to buy in on a certain vision, it always happens best when you empower them to speak up and you get them to weigh in.
Absolutely.
So kind of prove your point a little bit, but
yes.
Well, cool, Javi. This has been such a great wow. I feel like we could have gone on for like a few hours here, but
absolutely
don't want to bombard too much on the listeners. But this has been amazing. So, Javi, tell us, how can we learn a little bit more about you? Maybe get involved with your work, get some access to some of the things that you're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm at, like I said before, Jewish Family and Children's Services. I'm in the Children's Clinical Department, which is now being called the Center for Children and Youth. And you can find me at parentsplace.org. It's the website. You can find my bio, set up a consultation for your family if you'd like. I also have a private practice called Health E-Connections, and it's actually havihall.com. And that's where I actually will Marie Kondo your life, your technology life. And
love it.
I have contracted with many a family to just start this conversation with you, to walk through the various steps that your family needs. It is all personalized. There is no one size fits all at all. But that is what I do on my off hours. And, just reaching out. I also offer a lot of workshops. We are doing webinars now, so just take a look at our schedule at parentsplace.org. And if there is a topic that you don't see that you would like to see, please just write to us and we will make that happen. I also come out to the community, so feel free to reach out if you feel like a PTA meeting, or if this is something that you would love your school to start really thinking about in terms of device policy and things like that. I'm also available to help organizations and communities think about that.
Awesome. Sounds good. You are a treasure trove of many
Oh,
resources
well,
and
thank you, David.
such
This
a
has been a
great,
pleasure.
yeah, it's been so much fun. So thank you for hopping on, Javi. I know we'll be staying in close touch,
Absolutely.
and I encourage all the listeners to feel free to reach out if you think that Javi can be of assistance to you in any way.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for jumping on. Take care.